in to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive. I am your host, Austin Render, here with you for episode 10. We have already made it to 10 episodes here, which is awesome. It has been a ton of fun to watch this podcast grow. And if you missed our last episode with Charlie Cream, ESPN's bracketologist, highly recommend going back, listening to that. Maybe if you're a Michigan fan, maybe stay away from it. He was not super high on the Wolverines, but I told him if he's wrong, we'll all throw electronic tomatoes at him. But it was a great episode, that one, plus a lot of team-centered episodes. We've done Nebraska, we've done Minnesota, Michigan State, UCLA, USC, maybe the two favorites in the conference, Illinois, and we've got a ton more coming. So if your team hasn't been mentioned yet, make sure you keep listening, because I promise we're going to get to all 18 teams by the time we get to the word go of that season, that first week in November. If your team has been previewed, go back, listen to it. And while you're doing that, subscribe to us, download our episodes, give us a rating. That's the kind of stuff that helps us kind of see where we're at with our listenership. We appreciate everybody who sent out good things to us. It's been a ton of fun doing this podcast so far, and I think we're only getting started. I think the season's going to be a ton of fun. Quickly, just a couple of Big Ten news and notes. There's not a lot going on. Two teams finishing up their foreign tours. Illinois played just 2 games overseas. They won their first game, I believe, by just 2 points, but their second game, much more convincing, 106-42 win. Sophomore Gretchen Dolan led the way, 21 points. Kendall Bostic doing her thing, 20 points, 12 rebounds. And a new name to the fold is freshman Haven Smith, 12 points and 11 boards for her. Purdue was also overseas, and they were doing a pretty good job as well. 3-0, game 2, a 93-41 win led by Sophie Swanson with 13 points, Rashonda Jones with 12, and another new name to the Big Ten, Lena McCarthy, the freshman for Purdue, 12 points and 13 rebounds. And they won their final game 94-75 with Elena Harper leading the way. We'll get to a Purdue preview here in the next couple of weeks, a team that has a lot of new coming into this season, certainly a lot to talk about. Speaking of a team that has a lot of new, maybe the most new in the conference, that's the Oregon Ducks. And to preview one of the new 4 teams into the conference, it's Chris Clayton, the voice of the Oregon Ducks on the Oregon Sports Network. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the Big Ten Conference. I know I don't speak for the Big Ten, but I'm still going to welcome you in anyway. How are you, man? How's your summer going?
I'm doing great. Man, what an honor. I'm following Charlie Cream. Man, that's tough. I got a lot to live up to, but I'm so excited. I think there's, for a lot of Ducks fans, it's kind of weird times, right? You have all the history, the pageantry of the Pac-12, and it had, especially in women's basketball, just an incredible season and the firepower and the depth. And then all of a sudden you're in a new conference. So it's weird times. I think this is a great opportunity for Duck fans to learn about the Big Ten, and for Big Ten fans to learn about the Ducks, because it's going to be new, but there's a lot of talent in the Big Ten, and I think the Ducks will fit well, and it's going to be a fun year.
Well, this is an Oregon team that it certainly has the track record of being a team that belongs in a top-tier conference. They've had some super good teams. Let's start with a crash course on last year's Oregon Ducks. It obviously was not a great year for Oregon. Doesn't exactly show in the win-loss record the way that Kelly Graves is used to there in Eugene. What was going on? What were kind of the issues that were bothering Oregon throughout last season?
Well, it started early. Within the first few minutes of the season opener, the point guard, Peyton Scott, goes down with an injury, and unfortunately ended up being a torn ACL, so she misses the whole year. And actually going into the year, talking with Kelly Graves, he said, we don't have the most depth. We really can't lose our playmaker, Peyton Scott. And sure enough, unfortunately, she goes down. And it was tough from there. Players were forced to play out of position and to try and fill those roles that maybe they weren't used to in the past. And they did their best to do so, but the depth just wasn't quite there. And I think at times in sports, we've seen sometimes it can feel like an avalanche, especially with Oregon's difficult schedule. There's just no let up. There's no time for, with the Pac-12 last year now and even into the Big Ten, there's no time for transition games and easy games because you just don't have that opportunity. So Chance Gray moves over to the point guard and is learning that role and getting better and better as she goes along. But Kelly Graves and the coaching staff throughout the year were trying to figure out the right rotations, the right starting fives to to try and find success. I think they ended up using 8 starting fives throughout the course of the season, which you just don't hear very often. And in one of those was actually a former walk-on, Ula Chamberlain, who ended up shooting 40+% from 3, and she did her best. But, she's a walk-on, and you've got players that are being forced to play heavy, serious minutes against top-level national talent. So I think the reality is nobody make any excuses about it. Kelly Graves has been honest from the start. He said, this is not where the standard of Oregon basketball is. That's not where he wanted it to be. And there were some close losses, there were some tough losses, and some things that were out of their control. But a lot of it was he took full responsibility for it. And it was interesting. He said, going in the offseason, we're going to be aggressive. And he definitely was.
Yeah, I think, tied with Maryland for the most incoming transfers into the program, which we'll certainly get into as we go through this podcast, because there is a lot to get to. But you mentioned it, emphasis on the portal. Obviously lost a lot of players in the portal, so you have to try and go regroup in some way. But from what you have heard, maybe from what you have seen, what was the emphasis when they were looking in the transfer portal? What were the type of players they were trying to get to fill out this team?
A big factor that they wanted to improve on was three-point shooting, especially when you have Philly Che down low, who 6'8", is turned into a star. She's going to be one of the best centers in the Big Ten, just as she was one of the best centers in the Pac-12 last year. And she's taken steps forward, and she's really knocking on the door to be one of the top centers in the country. I mean, that's the type of impact she has in the game. An elite rebounder, her touch around the basket getting better and better. So when you have that, you're drawing double and even triple teams against certain opponents who maybe don't have a big at her size. So what do you need to balance the floor, right? Three-point shooting. It's logical. It makes sense, especially when you look at the track record of Kelly Graves and the offensive juggernauts that Graves and the Ducks have had. And even going beyond or behind that in his career to back to when he coached Gonzaga, the offensive firepower that he had there. So it was an anomaly to have a team, and probably frustrating for him, that they couldn't quite knock down outside shots as consistently as he wanted. So that was a big emphasis in the portal. They wanted to find three-point shooting, and they did. They also, beyond the portal, also have a freshman, Katie Fizo, who can shoot the ball as well. So that was a big factor. And, like I said, we can go into some of the players, but three-point shooting was one. They wanted some more athleticism in the front court to be able to defend these versatile players. You've got guards, and I'll just bring up, maybe the best of them all. A player like Juju Watkins, right? She's a guard, but she's a big guard. Sometimes it can be useful to put a bigger player on her, or at least be able to switch defensively and move your feet. So Oregon was limited at times with their quickness defensively, so they wanted some more depth in the front court. Those are two big factors. And honestly, Austin, when you have a year like Oregon did where it was tough, I think they were just looking for talent, right? Let's go get some really good players. Not that they were just taking anybody, but when you have a season like the Ducks had, you're not going to be as choosy, if you will, about who you're getting. You're saying, hey, that's a good basketball player. Let's bring them in and let's make it work. And also, that's hoops, right? You fit your system and change your system to your players. And I think that was the mentality for Graves and the coaching staff. Let's get some really good players and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, Kelly Graves is obviously one of the more, now it's weird to say this because he hasn't been in the Big Ten yet, but one of the more experienced coaches in this conference, this new conference that he's joining in his 10th year. But how have you seen kind of his coaching style adapt as he's gone through his tenure at Oregon? Or has it been pretty similar? This is the type of player I want. This is the type of system we're going to run. And if so, introduce Big Ten fans to what they're going to see out of a Kelly Graves offensive unit.
Well, offensively for Kelly Graves, historically, what he's been able to thrive in is the pick and roll. I think he was kind of innovative in how much power he was giving to guards and the ability to just put the ball in your best guard's hand. I mean, you think about Sabrina Ionescu, and in hindsight, how great of a player she is, of course, you're just going to give her the ball and get out of the way. But that's not always something that we've seen at this level of women's basketball. And he was kind of on the forefront of utilizing that pick and roll consistently. And you saw it in his track record at Oregon. You could go back and find a list of the offensive numbers Oregon has put up year to year under Kelly Graves, whether it's effective field goal percentage, three-point shooting, it's always there. The firepower has always been there. And I think that's what made last year a little bit more frustrating, is it's not exactly where they wanted it to be. But I think he's he's the type of coach where he's hard on his players and he'll coach them, but he also empowers them to thrive and succeed, and they can be creative, and he allows them to make success. And I think about kind of the best offensive coaches that we see, women's basketball and men's basketball, is the ones that allow their players to make those mistakes and learn. And overcoaching can be, I think, sometimes at the college level especially, can hamper certain players, right? But I think if you kind of have that professional mindset where you allow those players to make the plays and you try not to micromanage every decision they make, that's when you see really offensive success and a lot of firepower. So I think he allows his players to really lead the charge. And I think we're going to see with this team this year, with a lot more guards, we're going to see a lot more ball screens and pick and roll, and they'll be able to utilize that. And I think with him as a person, I think people are just going to love him. And I think for someone like you, someone that's a broadcaster in the media, he's great. I mean, he's an open book. He's willing to talk to anybody. Super funny, charismatic guy. He'll meet fans in the airport and he'll give them as much time as they want. And it's very genuine. So he's just, beyond all of his success on the court, he's a guy that is insanely likable. And, obviously maybe I'm biased working with the team, if you will, but he's a guy that people are going to fall in love with pretty quickly.
It sounds like a future Dribble Drive guest, Kelly Graves, is what
he would absolutely. Yes.
Which would be an awesome episode. There'd be a lot to get into there. So obviously the key departures, Grace Van Sluten and Chance Gray, both hit the transfer portal. And both end up, I believe, they're in the Big Ten now.
Yep.
Both of them, which we have talked about in this podcast, becoming more and more, which also harder to avoid now that these conferences have 16 to 18 teams. But there's a lot more in-conference transferring than there used to be. So a couple of names leave, but they filled that in. I mean, you're bringing in 4 double-digit scorers from their previous spots, a couple other names as well who are role players for their respective squads. Plus, you mentioned Katie Fiso, the freshman who's a top 35 recruit. Let's start at the top, though. Or I think maybe the top. There's certainly a bunch of names you could consider as the best transfer, but Deja Kelly, kind of the big name one, a graduate transfer from North Carolina. We saw her when the Tar Heels came to Bloomington. I was very impressed with her game. How do you feel like she's going to fit into this Kelly Graves system?
I think she's going to fit perfectly, because I think what stands out about Deja Kelly is she's able to play on and off the ball. She does so many things well. Defensively, she can guard multiple positions. She can hit the three. I think, you're going back to her sophomore season, she shot 36% from three. It's gone down a little bit the last couple of years, but she has that in her bag, that three-point shooting, especially she has a team like this Oregon roster where the floor is going to be more spaced out, and hopefully she can get some easier, more open looks. And then all of a sudden you see a player's percentage go way up and you're like, whoa, maybe they are a really good shooter. You just need open looks. That's weird. And so I think that is going to be really helpful, is her ability to do so many different things well, but also her big game experience. I mean, you look at all the games she's played over the course of her career, but all the big games she's played, a lot of success in the ACC at UNC. And so I think that was part of what was Oregon was missing as well, is they didn't have a lot of players with that big game experience and a closer, if you will, down the stretch. That's something that Kelly Graves has talked about, is he wants kind of an alpha, if you will, a closer that when the game gets tough in the closing minutes, they don't have to be making the shots, but they need somebody there to kind of calm everybody down and get everybody on the right track. And I think they have that in Peyton Scott as well, who's going to be coming back from injury last year. But, you can't have enough of those. But Deja Kelly fits that role beautifully. So I think, you talk about who's the most exciting transfer. I don't know, but you have to just look at her resume and understand, as an all-region selection and an all-ACC selection, she's going to be really powerful force. And she also has a big presence off the court. She's kind of got that queen mantra going about her overall presence as a person. So I think she's a powerful force and can be a great leader for the Ducks.
I mean, if it's happened, she's seen it. She's been around the block. She's seen it. She's played in it. It's not as if she has just played meaningless basketball. She's been on a really good team in NCAA tournament games and ACC tournament games and high-level ACC situations. That's certainly a veteran that's, I would think, going to help lead this team. I'm going to be honest. There's a lot of Oregon where I need a pronunciation guide here with some of the people that the Ducks have added. But help me out with your transfer from BYU, a really solid player you've added to the program.
Yeah, Nani Falatea.
There we go.
She's that's another exciting one as well. Just with her, you talk about 3-point shooting, which she's excited about. She can really shoot the ball. She shot about 37% last year and at a pretty high volume clip. So she's going to space the floor beautifully. That's another player that can play off the ball pretty well. So you have players, and you can see kind of the vision of what Kelly Graves and the coaching staff was thinking about when you start to see the teams these players have played on before have had a lot of talent. So they're used to playing with others and not having to be the main focal point. And Falatea falls into that beautifully. And look, I'm not going to act like and lie and sit here I'm an expert on all these players, because there's so many new ones. There's 9 newcomers on the team. There's 6 coming back, but some of the biggest pieces on this team are going to be new. So I'm as interested as anybody to see how they all fit together. But when you look at the videos I've been able to watch with these players and their game highlights, but you don't really know until they get on the court together how they can form a cohesive winning team, which they're working on day to day right now.
That's what was so interesting about the episode with Charlie Cream, which, again, go back, episode 9. Highly recommend listening to it. But there's only so much you can do in the preseason to prognosticate what these teams are going to look like. And for somebody like Charlie Cream, he's got to come up with a bracketology. He's got to put teams in the field and put teams on the bubble. And we don't know anything about our teams. And that's kind of been the thing as I've brought guys on here. You and I are in the same boat. Like, we're just waiting for fall practice. We get in there and kind of get our eyes on this new team and how they're going to work together. So that is an important note, that as we kind of detail these players that the Ducks have added, and this goes for all of our podcasts, that take it with a slight grain of salt, because we are still learning these new people and what they're all going to look like together. But I think it's kind of like, it's fun though in a way, because you've kind of got these new like Christmas presents. Like, man, we just added Deja Kelly to our team, and oh my goodness, now we've got 3-point shooting with Falatea. How do you Falatea? Did I say that right?
Falatea. Yep.
Falatea. Like there we go. I'm gonna get it by the start of the season, but. Nani Falatea. How about Alexis Whitfield from UCSB? Another 15-point-a-game scorer. Like, you just start the transfers and you've got a lineup that averaged over 70 points a game. This is a really, I would imagine, it's an uncertain time, but an exciting time for Oregon fans because of all the new players that they've added. Give us a little bit on Alexis Whitfield.
I think she fits beautifully, and it's not. If you look position by position, player by player, there's really no weaknesses on paper for Oregon. They have it all. They have the center in Philly Che. They have the guards. They have the depth. Whitfield fits in as a versatile, maybe 3 or 4. She's 6'2". She can score off the dribble. She can pass. She's an example of a player at UC Santa Barbara who was the focal point of the team for the most part. She had some talented teammates, but maybe not, hasn't played with other stars like some of the other players have in their college careers. But that's not to take anything away from her. It's just, what she was able to accomplish as the star of her team. She's ready for that new challenge to be at Oregon and play among the nation's best in the Big Ten. So she fits in beautifully because she's a player that she can knock down outside shots. She's shown that ability off the catch as well, which I think will be helpful when Philly Che is drawing a lot of attention inside. But she can also handle the basketball. So she's another player that is going to give opponents headaches because this roster is showing that, for example, let's go back to last year, which can be kind of useless because Oregon has so many new players. But you think about Grace Van Sluten and Chance Gray and how much pressure they had for Oregon game to game to score. They were having an off shooting game, or maybe they got in foul trouble, or maybe they were hurt, which happened a few games. There wasn't a lot of other players that could consistently step up and score. This year, if you have somebody have an off shooting game, there's always more weapons. So I think Whitfield fits in beautifully, and she might average 15 points per game again. Or even if her scoring goes down a bit, she's able to still chip in double digits. She's a mismatch problem, and so she's going to give opponents fits. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to these Ducks coaches what they're able to accomplish, because she's the type of player a lot of teams are going after her in the portal.
And I think this is another reason why somebody like Deja Kelly is so important, because Deja Kelly, as we said, has played high-level ACC Power 5 NCAA tournament games, whereas some of these other players were great. And BYU was in the Big 12 last season, so a little different story there. But obviously Whitfield from UCSB, and then Alyssa Mevius from Siena, another really good player. But maybe it takes a little bit of time to adjust to the Big Ten level, and that's where Deja Kelly can come in and say, hey, this is how things go. She could be a great leader. As you said, Philly Che has been around. She knows what's going on as well in these Power 5 conferences. And then you had a lot of role players. I'm going to be honest, I'm not even sure I could take a stab at the Arizona transfer. Do you have the pronunciation on that one?
Yeah, so that is Salamatu Karoma.
Okay, there we go. Salamatu Karoma. All right, that rolls off the tongue well. I like that. And then Amina Muhammad from Texas and Ari Long from Washington. So none of them averaged double figures, but they all had a role with their previous teams. They all have Power 5, I guess now Power 4 conference experience. I would imagine, as you said, last year depth was a bit of an issue for Oregon. I would imagine these are all extremely important pieces to bring in to establish more off the bench for Oregon in 24-25.
Definitely. And I think, we see it year to year. When you get into conference play and you get into these battles, you're going to have those games where players get in foul trouble or maybe they're hurt. In terms of Oregon's returners, unfortunately, last year, Sophia Bell, who was a crucial defensive player, she went down with an injury, and it was hard to replace her the second half of Pac-12 play. So there was 2 players in the backcourt that went down last year. You never know what can happen. I mean, God forbid somebody gets hurt again. But Oregon has that depth and has those options there. But one player I just wanted to go back to that you mentioned is Elisa Mevius. Just won a gold medal with Germany as part of the 3-on-3 team there. So, maybe you think on paper, okay, at Siena, she didn't have the biggest game experience. She averaged 4.5 steals per game, by the way, at Siena. So we know she can defend. She's got some height as a guard.
We should pause. That's an absurd number, by the way. 4.5 steals a game.
Yes.
I mean, that is the definition of a defensive pest.
Yes. And that just takes instinct beyond just having long arms and athleticism. That's insane. So I'm really excited to watch her as the Metro Atlantic Conference Defensive Player of the Year last year translate up to the Big Ten. And now she had this summer in which she was playing for a gold medal. Talk about those bright lights and that big game experience. She's got it now because there's some innate pressure with representing your country. And so how does she fit in? How do you find minutes for all these players? I don't know for sure, but I know Mevius is going to be a tenacious defender when she gets in the game.
That's a good problem to have, trying to find minutes for everybody. And especially, I would imagine, a welcome, if you even want to call it a problem, a welcome problem to have for Kelly Graves and his staff next season. As you look at just how all of this is going to fit together, like you said earlier, it's not apples to apples when you say what went wrong last year. How do we fix that this year? But if there is something that you could say, okay, this felt like a big issue last year. If we fix this part of just basketball in general, whether that's rebounding, three-point shooting, defensively, certain aspects, where can Oregon take the biggest leap here in their first season in the Big Ten?
I really think it is the outside shooting. I think there were some games last year that was really what was holding them back, because there was a lot of games the defense kept them in it. They had length. They had athleticism. I mentioned Sophia Bell. I wanted to bring her up again. She is a great defensive player. She, as a freshman last year, she would have made all Pac-12 freshman team if not for that injury in which she missed a little bit more than the second half of Pac-12 play. So, whether she's a starter or not, she's going to be a big aspect in this team defensively. They ran a 2-3 zone a lot last year. So there was games where that caught up to them against teams that could attack a zone effectively and figure it out. But there's games where it was just clamping and locking opponents down. And what held them back? That firepower offensively. And I think being able to stretch the floor and hit some threes is really going to be crucial for this team. Because I do think, again, they're going to be a really good defensive squad. These transfers we've talked about, they are tall, they are versatile, they can move their feet, whether it's in the backcourt with Sophia Bell and Elisa Mevius, or it's inside with Philly Che, who's 6'8", who's among the top 5 in the Pac-12 in block shots throughout her career. She's going to be protecting the rim. There's really no flaws defensively. So if they can bring it consistently on offense and hit threes at an effective clip, I really think that's going to be crucial this year. And that's going to take a lot of pressure off. Because sometimes, as you know, Austin, if you're not hitting shots offensively, that can bleed over into your defense. It's discouraging. It's frustrating. And you kind of lose that fire. So I think that's going to help this team putting up more points and then also emotionally hitting some outside shots.
There's no doubt that's true. You even see it in something like football, which obviously is coming up here shortly, when a defense is making stop after stop after stop, but the offense can't get anything going. Eventually, the defense is going to get frustrated, and eventually they're going to break. And that happens with the same players doing offense and defense in basketball. It just starts to bleed one way or another into your other aspect of the game. Sophia Bell's a good point about Oregon as well, where not only that you lose some to the transfer portal, you bring a ton new in, but there's also a lot of new in the sense of they were injured and missed a decent portion of last season. And so not only are there new transfers coming in, there's new people in the sense of didn't play a whole lot last year or weren't as effective as they wanted to be because they were injured. And so Oregon is just going to look like, I imagine, a whole different team than what we saw throughout their final season in the Pac-12. The other new is Katie Fiso. You've touched on her a little bit, a top 35 recruit. It feels like everybody that's coming over from the Pac-12 here into the Big Ten is bringing in some really good recruits. Obviously, UCLA and USC have loaded up in that area. Give us a little bit of a profile on Katie Fiso.
She's an exciting player. Kelly Graves is really excited about what she brings to the table. First of all, she won 4 state championships at Garfield High School, which is it's at the 3A level out of the it goes up to 4A in Washington, but one of the highest classifications, the big classifications, if you will, in Washington, 4 straight state titles. So she stepped on campus at Garfield High and she won. And there's something to be said about that. You think about some of the best Oregon players that have come through. Peyton Pritchard came through from West Linn High School on the men's side after winning 4 straight state titles, and he accomplished almost as much as anybody has in an Oregon uniform. So there's something to be said about someone that's a leader and a winner, and that's how Kelly Graves describes Katie Fiso. And she's coming onto a team with some really experienced players that are 23, 24 years old, right? Grown women almost. So I don't know. She might come on and start immediately. She might come on and have to kind of transition slowly. I don't know. But I know Kelly Graves has said, I think she's the best point guard in the country. And obviously, coaches are going to say that sometimes about the recruits. They believe in them. But he really believes in Katie Fiso. And if you watch the film, you understand why. The clutch shots in winning time that she has put up for Garfield High School over the years has been incredible. She's got great size for a point guard. And she's just a winner. And you just can't overlook that. And I think with her three-point shooting, her ability to make off the dribble, she's going to be on the court making plays sooner than later.
Winning is a skill. Winning is something that can only help at any level, wherever you're doing it at. Learning how to win is so important. If you bring in a high school player that has won 4 state titles, that is the definition of knowing how to win. That is finding a way to win at whatever level you are playing at. And so I'm just excited because this conference is such a great blend of, as you mentioned, the 23, 24-year-olds, because we're kind of at the end of that COVID cycle where some of these players are the last players who get to use that 5th or 6th year. And then there's these so talented freshmen. Ohio State's got some, USC, UCLA, Nebraska, Illinois, Oregon. There are talented freshmen all over this conference. So it's going to be an interesting blend of 18-year-olds and 23, 24-year-olds trying to play on the same court against each other or with each other. It's going to be extremely fascinating. One thing with this new era that we live in college basketball, transfer portal's heavy, NIL is heavy. It has changed the way, you look at a rebuild project, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. I think it can at times make it harder to rebuild because you think, okay, we are building our way up. Oh, look, Iowa lost Caitlin Clark. Oh, look, Indiana lost Mackenzie Holmes. Okay, so there's some room at the top of this conference. And, oh, wait, they just rebuilt and just replaced everybody. And now if we're one of those bottom 4 or 5 teams in the conference, we're still looking up at them. there's also the Oregon kind of thought process, at least on paper going into this year, which is didn't have a great year last year, but we can use the portal to quickly rebuild. And that's what it feels like Kelly Graves is attempting to do. Does it feel like that's kind of what Oregon is they're kind of trying to utilize what's on the table now, which is the transfer portal, and jump a few steps and become a tournament team right away?
Yeah, and it's interesting. And Kelly Graves, part of what's so great about him is just how refreshingly honest he is about this stuff. And he said publicly that, the transfer portal is not something in the past that he had embraced as much as he does now, because historically as a coach, what brought you to where you are, where Kelly Graves, for example, among other college basketball coaches, they won all these games, they won conference championships, they made deep tournament runs by developing freshmen, and they keep the same core together. You have your younger players, and then the senior leadership brings them along, and then it's just the cycle that continues. But it's a different era now where, in Kelly Graves, the way he described it, he said, you're kind of just looking, ideally you get freshmen, right? And you keep them. That would be great. And it's possible you can do that. But a lot of schools, you kind of have to think season by season, because if you don't, you're not keeping up. The way that these power conference schools and even the smaller schools now are bringing in the talent that they need, okay, we're strong in the backcourt, we're weak in the front court. Let's go out and get somebody for the front court. And all of a sudden, that's a more complete team just by bringing in a couple pieces. So you have to keep up and you have to be gunning for those transfers. And Kelly Graves has been very refreshingly honest. He said he's talked to Oregon football coach Dan Lanning about how they embraced the transfer portal. He said he spoke with Ducks men's basketball head coach Dana Altman kind of about his approach to it. And Coach Graves has kind of embraced it, and he understands now that, not that he didn't understand, but I guess I should say he embraces now the idea of bringing in these transfers and these young women that maybe only have a year or two left of their careers in order to have success, because you can't just be thinking, okay, in 4 years, this player is going to be good. You've got to think, who's going to help us right now? And that's just the state of college basketball now.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It's what can you do for me this season? And in some ways, it might be hurting the high school recruitment, which is something that I would imagine in the next cycle of how things change in college sports, it's going to be addressed. But it also makes it hard in the rebuilding part for Oregon's not one of these schools that I would imagine a great NIL base with Phil Knight and Nike and all that stuff. But like some of these smaller schools, and even smaller within the big conferences, they get a great player and then they're gone. And that's part of it as well, is you can't rely now as heavily on somebody staying at your school for 4 years unless you are truly one of the giants of the game, which is making everything have extra layers to it. It just feels like college sports are an onion, and we are just peeling a new layer off every year and finding out new things, whether it's NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff. All right, you're joining the Big Ten. What's your experience with the Big Ten Conference? What's your experience with some of the venues you may be heading out to as you join this new frontier?
I don't have. I've been to Columbus. I called a game when I worked at a Division II college at Ohio State, but most of these venues I've never been to. So I went to the University of Oregon. I grew up in Oregon, so seeing the demise of the Pac-12 as it once was very emotional and weird. And you'll certainly miss, for the time being, some of those conference matchups. Not that they don't exist anymore. These teams will still play each other. But on the other side of things, Big Ten country is exciting. I mean, these people, not the Pac-12 fans didn't, but these people are serious about basketball, right? I mean, basketball is invented in Big Ten country. So I'm really excited because these will be new venues that, selfishly I'll get to experience. So I'm really pumped. I think year one, we'll go into, let's see, I'm trying to think of Northwestern, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State. The farthest, we're going to Nebraska. The farthest east the Ducks go is to Penn State. But we'll see what happens in the postseason. But I'm just really excited to get to experience the Big Ten country and those Big Ten fans, and there's going to be some great games. I think the thing about the Pac-12 last year was they're so good. It felt wild breaking that all up. But now you have Big Ten fans hopefully excited because there's some superstar, incredible talent coming in from the West Coast, and it's going to make it a really deep conference. It's going to be crazy.
I think women's basketball, and I don't know this for a fact, I'd have to go deeper into maybe some of the other Olympic sports, but women's basketball might benefit the most off of this because of the substance and the players and the coaches and the programs, the history that they're bringing into the conference. I mean, they're bringing in probably 2 of the top 5 preseason teams in the country, and the 2 LA schools, an Oregon program that has a ton of recent history being a tournament team, and now they bring in a ton of transfers, and a Washington team that's really on the up and coming here over the past couple of seasons, and I'm excited to preview them as well here coming down the line, and I think it's just such an exciting time for the Big Ten. Is there a spot in the conference that or like a venue that you're excited to get to here in the next year or two whenever you end up playing said school?
I'd love to play at Indiana. I think
I think I need to have somebody else ask that question because everybody always answers Indiana, and I don't want people to be like, "Oh, the host is the Indiana broadcast."
No,
I got to say Assembly Hall.
Honestly, that's my answer. I think about all the history of college basketball, and I love college basketball, and so I just look at that venue and everything it represents. It embodies college basketball beautifully, and the passion of those fans. And so I think that's going to be one that's going to be like a bucket list experience for me to be able to go in there and especially to call a game. But you know, I'm excited about the entire Big Ten because I love traveling. I like experiencing new venues, new arenas, and but I think that's got to be number one. Honest answer.
It's a lot of good venues. It's a lot of good college towns. Definitely a great conference to go around and when you travel, go into the towns, go experience the city that the college is based in. That's the fun part. And then obviously the arenas are great. Just be prepared for some of the spots to be higher than maybe you're used to out there in Pac-12 country. Not everybody's courtside out here in the Big Ten. I learned that from Dave from UCLA. Apparently every Pac-12 broadcast spot is on the court. That is not the case in the Big Ten. We got some spots up in the rafters. So just prepare yourself. Do you go to Minnesota this year?
Yes.
Okay, that'll be one that just prepare yourself. That one.
Okay.
And we had Justin on, and he said they're working on it. But you are in the upper corner of the barn.
Okay.
So just
Kelly Graves. I won't tell Kelly Graves that because for our post-game interview, he's not going to be happy about that. We might have to make it.
That's one where I strap mine. I always say, "Yep, no, you're going to get lost trying to get up to me. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, we might have to scrap that. Otherwise, he's going to be sweating by the time he makes it up.
That's always a tough one. Well, I've said it all year. I don't say this just because you're on the podcast, but Eugene is the place I'm super excited to get out to this year. As soon as all these teams join the conference, I said, you know what, Eugene is a place I've wanted to go. Seems like a ton of fun. I'm sure it'll be just wonderful weather when we come out there, and who knows, January probably. But I'm stoked to get out there and see it.
You should be. It's great. I think I guess I won't assume anything, but a lot of people think, for whatever reason that I've talked to, that it's really cold and it snows in Eugene because it's so far north. The winter's really not too bad. It rains.
See, I did have that assumption.
Yeah, so it's rainy, right? I mean, there's long months where you're not going to see the sun too often. It'll be very cloudy and it's cold, but there's not a lot of snowfall. The snowfall doesn't happen that often. So, it doesn't usually get below freezing. So someone like you that's coming from the Midwest, I think you're going to love the weather when you show up, you get off that plane. It's really not too bad. And the rain it's not a torrential downpour. It's usually more like a mist, and it's pretty constant, but it's not that bad. And I think that's why a lot of people visit Oregon and they end up wanting to move there because they're like, wow, this weather's pretty nice. So I think you're going to love it. And I'm excited to have you, and we'll be able to link up and, whenever Indiana plays at Oregon, it'll be exciting.
It's going to be great. I didn't expect minute 40 we'd get into Oregon meteorology, but I love this. This is great. The folks at home who are going to be traveling out to Eugene this year now have a little dose of what it's going to be like, and maybe better than we Midwesterners thought it would be.
Yes.
Chris, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to have you and Oregon at the conference. It's going to be an awesome year of Big Ten women's basketball, and I appreciate you giving us a good preview into what Oregon could look like this year.
Man, it was an honor coming on. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I can't wait for the season.
Well, everybody keep subscribing, downloading the episodes. Downloading the episodes is the best way for us to get data kind of on how the show's doing, so we appreciate that. All the preview episodes on our YouTube page, on our Spotify and Apple podcast page. Go back, listen to Team Center previews. We're going to lead you all the way up to the end of the season, which is just under 3 months from now. For Chris Clayton of the Oregon Sports Network, I'm Austin Render. We'll see you guys next